Section 5 of The Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 2, by Anonymous. The story told by the tailor. A citizen of this city did me the honour 2 days ago to invite me to an entertainment, which he was to give to his friends yesterday morning. Accordingly I went early, and found there about 20 persons. The master of the house was gone out upon some business, but in a short time returned, and brought with him a young man, a stranger, very well dressed and handsome, but lame. When he entered, we all rose, and out of respect to the master of the house, invited the young man to sit down with us upon the estrade. He was going to comply, but suddenly perceiving a barber in our company, flew backwards and made towards the door. The master of the house, surprised at his behaviour, stopped him. "Where are you going?" demanded he. "I bring you along with me to do me the honour of being my guest among the rest of my friends, and you are no sooner got into my house than you are for running away." "Sir," replied the young man, "for God's sake do not stop me. Let me go. I cannot without horror look upon that abominable barber, who, though he was born in a country where all the natives are white, resembles an Ethiopian, and his soul is yet blacker and more horrible than his face." We were all surprised to hear the young man speak in this manner, and began to have a very bad opinion of the barber, without knowing what ground the young man had for what he said. Nay, we protested we would not suffer any one to remain in our company who bore so horrid a character. The master of the house entreated the stranger to tell us what reason he had for hating the barber. "Gentlemen," resumed the young man, "you must know this cursed barber is the cause of my being lame, and having fallen into the most ridiculous and teasing situation you can imagine. For this reason I have sworn to avoid all the places where he is, and even not to stay in the cities where he resides. It was for this reason that I left Bagdad, where he then dwelt, and travelled so far to settle in this city at the extremity of Tartary, a place where I flattered myself I should never see him. And now, after all, contrary to my expectation, I find him here. This obliges me, gentlemen, against my will, to deprive myself of the honour of being merry with you. This very day I shall take leave of your town, and go, if I can, to hide my head where he cannot come." This said, he would have left us, but the master of the house earnestly entreated him to stay, and tell us the cause of his aversion for the barber, who all this while looked down and said not a word. We joined with the master of the house in his request, and at last the young man, yielding to our importunities, sat down, and after turning his back on the barber, that he might not see him, gave us the following narrative of his adventures. My father's quality might have entitled him to the highest posts in the city of Bagdad, but he always preferred a quiet life to the honours of a public station. I was his only child, and when he died I had finished my education, and was of age to dispose of the plentiful fortune he had left me, which I did not squander away foolishly, but applied to such uses as obtained for me everybody's respect. I had not yet been disturbed by any passion. I was so far from being sensible of love, that I bashfully avoided the conversation of women. One day, walking in the streets, I saw a large party of ladies before me, and that I might not meet them, I turned down a narrow lane, and sat down upon a bench by a door. I was placed opposite a window, where stood a pot of beautiful flowers, on which I had my eyes fixed, when the window opened, and a young lady appeared, whose beauty struck me. Immediately she fixed her eyes upon me, and in watering the flower pot with a hand whiter than alabaster, looked upon me with a smile that inspired me with as much love for her as I had formerly aversion for all women. After having watered her flowers, and darted upon me a glance full of charms that pierced my heart, she shut the window, and left me in inconceivable perplexity, from which I should not have recovered, if a noise in the street had not brought me to myself. I lifted up my head, and turning, saw the first causey of the city, mounted on a mule, and attended by 5 or 6 servants. He alighted at the door of the house, where the young lady had opened the window, and went in, from whence I concluded he was her father. I went home in an altered state of mind, agitated by a passion the more violent as I had never felt its assaults before. I retired to bed in a violent fever, at which all the family were much concerned. My relations, who had a great affection for me, were so alarmed by the sudden disorder that they importuned me to tell the cause, which I took care not to discover. My silence created an uneasiness that the physicians could not dispel, because they knew nothing of my distemper, and by their medicines rather inflamed than checked it. My relations began to despair of my life, when an old lady of our acquaintance, hearing I was ill, came to see me. She considered me with great attention, and after having examined me, penetrated, I know not how, into the real cause of my illness. She took my relations aside, and desired all my people would retire out of the room, and leave her with me alone. When the room was clear, she sat down on the side of my bed. "My son," said she, "you have obstinately concealed the cause of your illness, but you have no occasion to reveal it to me. I have experience enough to penetrate into a secret. You will not deny when I tell you it is love that makes you sick. I can find a way to cure you, if you will but inform me who that happy lady is, that could move a heart so insensible as yours, for you have the character of a woman hater, and I was not the last who perceived that such was your disposition. But what I foresaw has come to pass, and I am now glad of the opportunity to employ my talents in relieving your pain." The old lady having thus spoken, paused, expecting my answer; but though what she had said had made a strong impression upon me, I durst not lay open to her the bottom of my heart. I only turned to her and heaved a deep sigh, without replying a word. "Is it bashfulness," said she, "that keeps you silent? Or is it want of confidence in me? Do you doubt the effect of my promise? I could mention to you a number of young men of your acquaintance, who have been in the same condition with yourself, and have received relief from me." The good lady told me so many more circumstances, that I broke silence, declared to her my complaint, pointed out to her the place where I had seen the object which occasioned it, and unravelled all the circumstances of my adventure. "If you succeed," added I, "and procure me the happiness of seeing that charming beauty, and revealing to her the passion with which I burn for her, you may depend upon it I will be grateful." "My son," replied the old woman, "I know the lady you speak of. She is, as you rightly judged, the daughter of the first causey of this city. I am not surprised that you are in love with her. She is the handsomest and most lovely lady in Bagdad, but very proud, and of difficult access. You know how strict our judges are in enjoining the punctual observance of the severe laws that confine women, and they are yet more strict in the observation of them in their own families. The causey you saw is more rigid in that point than any of the other magistrates. They are always preaching to their daughters what a heinous crime it is to show themselves to men, and the girls themselves are so prepossessed with the notion, that they make no other use of their own eyes but to conduct them along the street, when necessity obliges them to go abroad. I do not say absolutely that the first causey's daughter is of that humour, but that does not hinder my fearing to meet with as great obstacles on her side as on her father's. Would to God you had loved any other, then I should not have had so many difficulties to surmount, However, I will employ all my wits to compass the matter, but it requires time. In the meanwhile, take courage and trust to me.' The old woman took leave, and as I weighed within myself all the obstacles she had been talking of, the fear of her not succeeding in her undertaking inflamed my disorder. Next day she came again, and I read in her countenance that she had no favourable news to impart. She spoke thus: 'My son, I was not mistaken. I have somewhat else to conquer besides the vigilance of a father. You love an insensible object, who takes pleasure in making everyone miserable who suffers himself to be charmed by her. She will not deign them the least comfort. She heard me with pleasure, when I spoke of nothing but the torment she made you undergo; but I no sooner opened my mouth to engage her to allow you to see her and converse with her, but, casting at me a terrible look, 'You are very presumptuous,' said she, 'to make such a proposal to me. I charge you never to insult me again with such language.' 'Do not let this cast you down,' continued she. 'I am not easily disheartened, and am not without hope but I shall compass my end.' To shorten my story, this good woman made several fruitless attacks in my behalf on the proud enemy of my rest. The vexation I suffered inflamed my distemper to that degree that my physicians gave me over. I was considered as a dead man when the old woman came to recall me to life. That no one might hear what was said, she whispered in my ear, 'Remember the present you owe for the good news I bring you.' These words produced a marvellous effect. I raised myself up in the bed, and with transport replied, 'You shall not go without a present. But what is the news you bring me?' 'Dear sir,' said she, 'you shall not die. I shall speedily have the pleasure to see you in perfect health, and very well satisfied with me. Yesterday I went to see the lady you love, and found her in good humour. As soon as I entered, I put on a sad countenance, heaved many deep sighs, and began to squeeze out some tears. 'My good mother,' demanded she, 'what is the matter with you? Why are you so cast down?' 'Alas, my dear and honourable lady,' I replied, 'I have just been with the young gentleman of whom I spoke to you the other day, who is dying on your account.' 'I am at a loss to know,' said she, 'how you make me to be the cause of his death. How can I have contributed to it?' 'How?' replied I. 'Did not you tell me the other day that he sat down before your window when you opened it to water your flower pot? He then saw that prodigy of beauty, those charms that your mirror daily represents to you. From that moment he languished, and his disorder has so increased that he is reduced to the deplorable condition I have mentioned. You well remember,' added I, 'how harshly you treated me at our last interview, when I was speaking to you of his illness, and proposing a way to save him from the threatened consequences of his complaint. After I left you, I went directly to his house, and he no sooner learnt from my countenance that I had brought no favourable answer, than his distemper increased. From that time, madam, he has been at the point of death, and I doubt whether your compassion would not now come too late to save his life.' The fear of your death alarmed her, and I saw her face change colour. 'Is your account true?' she asked. 'Has he actually no other disorder than what is occasioned by his love of me?' 'Ah, madam,' I replied, 'it is too true. Would it were false!' 'Do you believe,' said she, 'that the hopes of seeing me would at all contribute to rescue him from his danger?' I answered, 'Perhaps it may, and if you will permit me, I will try the remedy.' 'Well,' resumed she, sighing, 'give him hopes of seeing me, but he must pretend to no other favours, unless he aspire to marry me, and obtains my father's consent.' 'Madam,' replied I, 'your goodness overcomes me. I will instantly seek the young gentleman, and tell him he is to have the pleasure of an interview with you." "The best opportunity I can think of," said she, "for granting him that favour, will be next Friday at the hour of noon prayers. Let him observe when my father goes out, and then, if his health permits him to be abroad, come and place himself opposite the house. I shall then see him from my window, and will come down and open the door for him. We will converse together during prayer time, but he must depart before my father returns." "It is now Tuesday," continued the old lady. "You have the interval between this and Friday to recover your strength, and make the necessary dispositions for the interview." While the good old lady was speaking, I felt my illness decrease, or rather, by the time she had done, I found myself perfectly recovered. "Here, take this," said I, reaching out to her my purse, which was full. "It is to you alone that I owe my cure. I reckon this money better employed than all that I gave the physicians, who have only tormented me during my illness." When the lady was gone, I found I had strength enough to get up, and my relations, finding me so well, complimented me on the occasion, and went home. On Friday morning the old woman came, just as I was dressing, and, choosing out the richest clothes in my wardrobe, said, "I do not ask you how you are. What you are about is intimation enough of your health. But will not you bathe before you go?" "That will take up too much time," I replied. "I will content myself with sending for a barber to shave my head." Immediately I ordered one of my slaves to call a barber that could do his business cleverly and expeditiously. The slave brought me the wretch you see here, who came, and after saluting me, said, "Sir, you look as if you were not well." I told him I was just recovered from a fit of sickness. "May God," resumed he, "deliver you from all mischance. May his grace always go along with you. I hope he will grant your wish, for which I am obliged to you. Since you are recovering from a fit of sickness," he continued, "I pray God preserve your health. But now let me know what I am to do. I have brought my razors and my lancets. Do you desire to be shaved or to be bled?" I replied, "I am just recovered from a fit of sickness, and you may readily judge I only want to be shaved. Come, do not lose time in prattling, for I am in haste, and have an appointment precisely at noon." The barber spent much time in opening his case and preparing his razors. Instead of putting water into the basin, he took a very handsome astrolabe out of his case, and went very gravely out of my room to the middle of the court to take the height of the sun. He returned with the same grave pace, and entering my room, said, "Sir, you will be pleased to know this day is Friday the 18th of the moon Suphir, in the year 653, from the retreat of our great prophet from Mecca to Medina, and in the year 7320 of the epocha of the great Iskender with 2 horns, and that the conjunction of Mars and Mercury signifies you cannot choose a better time than this very day and hour for being shaved. But, on the other hand, the same conjunction is a bad presage to you. I learn from it that this day you run a great risk, not indeed of losing your life, but of an inconvenience which will attend you while you live. You are obliged to me for the advice I now give you, to avoid this accident. I shall be sorry if it befall you." You may guess, gentlemen, how vexed I was at having fallen into the hands of such a prattling, impertinent fellow. What an unseasonable adventure was it for a lover preparing for an interview with his mistress! I was quite irritated. "I care not," said I, in anger, "for your advice and predictions. I did not call you to consult your astrology. You came hither to shave me. Shave me or be gone." "I will call another barber, sir," replied he, with a coolness that put me out of all patience. "What reason have you to be angry with me? You do not know that all of my profession are not like me, and that if you made it your business to search, you would not find such another. You only sent for a barber, but here in my person you have the best barber in Bagdad, an experienced physician, a profound chemist, an infallible astrologer, a finished grammarian, a complete orator, a subtle logician, a mathematician perfectly well versed in geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, and all the refinements of algebra, an historian fully master of the histories of all the kingdoms of the universe. Besides, I understand all parts of philosophy. I have all our sacred traditions by heart. I am a poet, I am an architect, and what is it I am not? There is nothing in nature hidden from me. Your deceased father, to whose memory I pay a tribute of tears every time I think of him, was fully convinced of my merit. He was fond of me, and spoke of me in all companies as the first man in the world. Out of gratitude and friendship for him, I am willing to attach myself to you, to take you under my protection, and guard you from all the evils that your stars may threaten." When I heard all this jargon, I could not forbear laughing, notwithstanding my anger. "You impertinent prattler," said I, "will you have done, and begin to shave me?" "Sir," replied the barber, "you affront me in calling me a prattler. On the contrary, all the world gives me the honourable title of silent. I had 6 brothers, whom you might justly have called prattlers. These indeed were impertinent chatterers, but for me, who am a younger brother, I am grave and concise in my discourse. For God's sake, gentlemen, do but suppose you had been in my place. What could I say when I saw myself so cruelly delayed? 'Give him 3 pieces of gold,' said I to the slave who was my housekeeper, 'and send him away, that he may disturb me no more. I will not be shaved this day.' 'Sir,' said the barber, 'pray what do you mean? I did not come to seek for you, you sent for me; and as that is the case, I swear by the faith of a Mussulman, I will not stir out of these doors till I have shaved you. If you do not know my value, it is not my fault. Your deceased father did me more justice. Every time he sent for me to let his blood, he made me sit down by him, and was charmed with hearing what witty things I said. I kept him in a continual strain of admiration. I elevated him, and when I had finished my discourse, 'My God!' he would exclaim, 'you are an inexhaustible source of science. No man can reach the depth of your knowledge.' 'My dear sir,' I would answer, 'you do me more honour than I deserve. If I say anything that is worth hearing, it is owing to the favourable audience you vouchsafe me. It is your liberality that inspires me with the sublime thoughts which have the happiness to please you.' One day, when he was charmed with an admirable discourse I had made him, he said, 'Give him 100 pieces of gold, and invest him with one of my richest robes.' I instantly received the present. I then drew his horoscope, and found it the happiest in the world. Nay, I carried my gratitude further. I let his blood with cupping glasses." This was not all. He spun out another harangue that was a full half hour long. Tired with hearing him, and fretted at the loss of time, which was almost spent before I was half ready, I did not know what to say. "It is impossible," I exclaimed, "there should be such another man in the world, who takes pleasure as you do in making people mad." I thought I might perhaps succeed better if I dealt mildly with my barber. "In the name of God," said I, "leave off talking, and shave me directly. Business of the last importance calls me, as I have already told you." At these words he fell a laughing. "It would be fortunate," said he, if our minds were always in the same state, if we were always wise and prudent. I am willing, however, to believe that if you are angry with me, it is your disorder that has caused the change in your temper, for which reason you stand in need of some instructions, and you cannot do better than follow the example of your father and grandfather. They came and consulted me upon all occasions, and I can say without vanity that they always highly prized my advice. Pray observe, sir, men never succeed in their undertakings without the counsel of persons of understanding. A man cannot, says the proverb, be wise without receiving advice from the wise. I am entirely at service, and you have only to command me." "What! Cannot I prevail with you then," I demanded, interrupting him, "to leave off these long speeches that tend to nothing but to distract my head and detain me from my business? Shave me, I say, or begone." With that I started up in anger, stamping my foot against the ground. When he saw I was in earnest, he said, "Sir, do not be angry, we are going to begin." He lathered my head and began to shave me, but had not given 4 strokes with his razor before he stopped and addressed me. "Sir, you are hasty, you should avoid these transports that only come from the devil. I am entitled to some consideration on account of my age, my knowledge, and my great virtues." "Go on and shave me," said I, interrupting him again, "and talk no more." "That is to say," replied he, "you have some urgent business to go about. I will lay you a wager I guess right." "Why, I told you 2 hours ago," I returned. "You ought to have shaved me before." "Moderate your passion," replied he. "Perhaps you have not maturely weighed what you are going about. When things are done precipitately, they are generally repented of. I wish you would tell me what mighty business this is you are so earnest upon. I would tell you my opinion of it. Besides, you have time enough, since your appointment is not till noon, and it wants 3 hours of that yet." "I do not mind that," said I. "Persons of honour and of their word are rather before their time than after. But I forget that by reasoning with you, I give in to the faults of you prattling barbers. Have done, have done. Shave me." The more haste I was in, the less speed he made. He laid down the razor and took up his astrolabe, then laid down his astrolabe and took up his razor again. The barber quitted his razor again and took up his astrolabe a second time, and so left me half shaved, to go and see precisely what hour it was. Back he came and exclaimed, "Sir, I knew I was not mistaken. It wants 3 hours of noon. I am sure of it, or else all the rules of astronomy are false." "Just heaven!" cried I. "My patience is exhausted. I can bear this no longer. You cursed barber, you barber of mischief, I can scarcely forbear falling upon you and strangling you." "Softly, sir," said he, very calmly, without being moved by my anger. "Are you not afraid of a relapse? Be not in a passion. I am going to shave you this minute." In speaking these words, he clapped his astrolabe in his case, took up his razor, and passing it over the strap which was fixed to his belt, fell to shaving me again. But all the while he was thus employed, the dog could not forbear prattling. "If you would be pleased, sir," said he, "to tell me what the business is you are going about at noon, I could give you some advice that might be of use to you." To satisfy the fellow, I told him I was going to meet some friends at an entertainment at noon, to make merry with me on the recovery of my health. When the barber heard me talk of regaling, "God bless you this day as well as all other days," he cried. "You put me in mind that yesterday I invited 4 or 5 friends to come and eat with me as this day. Indeed, I had forgotten the engagement, and have made no preparation for them." "Do not let that trouble you," said I. "Though I dine abroad, my larder is always well furnished. I make you a present of all that it contains, and besides, I will order you as much wine as you have occasion for. I have excellent wine in my cellar, only you must hasten to finish shaving me. And pray remember, as my father made you presents to encourage you to speak, I give you mine to induce you to be silent." He was not satisfied with my promise, but exclaimed, "God reward you, sir, for your kindness. Pray show me these provisions now, that I may see if there will be enough to entertain my friends. I would have them satisfied with the good fare I make them." "I have," said I, "a lamb, 6 capons, a dozen chickens, and enough to make 4 courses." I ordered a slave to bring all before him, with 4 great pitchers of wine. "It is very well," returned the barber, "but we shall want fruit and sauce for the meat." These I ordered likewise, but then he left off shaving to look over everything one after another, and this survey lasted almost half an hour. I raged and stormed like a madman, but it signified nothing. The wretch made no more haste. However, he took up his razor again, and shaved me for some minutes, then stopping suddenly, exclaimed, "I could not have believed, sir, that you would have been so liberal. I begin to perceive that your deceased father lives again in you. Most certainly I do not deserve the favours with which you have loaded me, and I assure you I shall have them in perpetual remembrance, for, sir, to let you know, I have nothing but what I obtain from the generosity of such gentlemen as you. In which respect I am like to Xantoot, who rubs the people in the baths, to Sali, who cries boiled peas in the streets, to Salute, who sells beans, to Akersha, who sells greens, to Abu Makarez, who sprinkles the streets to lay the dust, and to Kasem, the caliph's lifeguard man. Of all these persons, not one is apt to be melancholy. They are neither impertinent nor quarrelsome. They are more contented with their lot than the caliph in the midst of his court. They are always gay, ready to sing and dance, and have each of them their peculiar song and dance, with which they divert the city of Bagdad. But what I esteem most in them is, that they are no great talkers, any more than your slave, that has now the honour to speak to you. Here, sir, is the song and dance of Xantoot, who rubs the people in the baths. Mind me, pray, and see if I do not imitate it exactly." The barber sung the song, and danced the dance of Xantoot, and let me say what I could to oblige him to finish his buffooneries, he did not cease till he had imitated in like manner the songs and dances of the other persons he had named. After that, addressing himself to me, "I am going," said he, "to invite all these honest men to my house. If you will take my advice, you will join us, and disappoint your friends, who perhaps are great talkers. They will only tease you to death with their impertinent discourse, and make you relapse into a disorder worse than that from which you are so lately recovered. Whereas at my house you shall have nothing but pleasure." Notwithstanding my anger, I could not forbear laughing at the fellow's impertinence. "I wish I had no business upon my hands," I replied. "I would accept your invitation, and go with all my heart to partake of your entertainment. But I beg to be excused, I am too much engaged. Another day I shall be more at leisure, and then we will make up the same party. Come, finish shaving me, and make haste home. Perhaps your friends are already arrived at your house." "Sir," replied he, "do not refuse me the favour I ask of you. Were you but once in our company, it would afford you so much pleasure as abundantly to compensate you for forsaking your friends." "Let us talk no more of that," said I. "I cannot be your guest." I found I gained no ground by mild terms. "Since you will not come to my house," replied the barber, "you must allow me to go along with you. I will carry these things to my house, where my friends may eat of them if they like, and I will return immediately. I would not be so uncivil as to leave you alone. You deserve this piece of complaisance at my hands.' 'Heavens!' cried I, 'then I shall not get clear of this troublesome fellow to day. In the name of the living God, leave off your unreasonable jargon. Go to your friends, drink, eat, and be merry with them, and leave me at liberty to go to mine. I must go alone. I have no occasion for company. Besides, I must needs tell you, the place to which I go is not one where you can be received.' 'You jest, sir,' said he. 'If your friends have invited you to a feast, what should prevent you from allowing me to go with you? You will please them, I am sure, by introducing to them a man who can talk wittily like me, and knows how to divert company. But say what you will, I am determined to accompany you.' These words, gentlemen, perplexed me much. How, thought I, shall I get rid of this cursed barber? If I persist in contradicting him, we shall never have done. Besides, I heard at this instant the first call to noon prayers, and it was time for me to go. In fine, I resolved to say nothing, and to make as if I consented to his accompanying me. He then finished shaving me, and I said to him, 'Take some of my servants to carry these provisions along with you, and return hither. I will stay for you, and shall not go without you.' At last he went, and I dressed myself as expeditiously as I could. I heard the last call to prayers, and hastened to set out. But the malicious barber, who guessed my intention, went with my servants only within sight of the house, and stood there till he saw them enter it, after which he concealed himself at the corner of the street, with an intent to observe and follow me. In fine, when I arrived at the causee's door, I looked back and saw him at the head of the street, which alarmed me to the last degree. The causee's door was half open, and as I went in, I saw an old woman waiting for me, who, after she had shut the door, conducted me to the chamber of the young lady who was the object of my love. But we had scarcely begun to converse, when we heard a noise in the streets. The young lady put her head to the window, and saw through the gate that it was her father already returning from prayers. At the same time I looked, and saw the barber sitting over against the house, on the bench from which I had first seen the young lady. I had then two things to fear: the arrival of the causee, and the presence of the barber. The young lady mitigated my apprehension on the first head by assuring me the causee came but seldom to her chamber, and as she had foreseen that this misadventure might happen, she had contrived a way to convey me out safely. But the indiscretion of the accursed barber made me very uneasy, and you shall hear that my uneasiness was not without ground. As soon as the causee was come in, he caned one of his slaves, who had deserved chastisement. This slave made a horrid noise, which was heard in the streets. The barber thought it was I who cried out, and was maltreated. Prepossessed with this thought, he roared out aloud, rent his clothes, threw dust upon his head, and called the neighbourhood to his assistance. The neighbours collected, and asked what assistance he wanted. 'Alas!' cried he, 'they are assassinating my master, my dear patron!' And without saying anything more, he ran all the way to my house, with the very same cry in his mouth. From thence he returned, followed by all my domestics, armed with sticks. They knocked with inconceivable fury at the door, and the causee sent a slave to see what was the matter. But the slave, being frightened, returned to his master, crying, 'Sir, above 10,000 men are going to break into your house by force.' Immediately the causee himself ran, opened the door, and asked what they wanted. His venerable presence could not inspire them with respect. They insolently said to him, "You cursed cauzee, what reason have you to assassinate our master? What has he done to you?" "Good people," replied the magistrate, "for what should I assassinate your master, whom I do not know, and who has done me no harm? My house is open to you, come and search." "You bastinadoed him," said the barber. "I heard his cries not a minute ago." "What harm could your master do to me," replied the cauzee, "to oblige me to abuse him at that rate? Is he in my house? If he is, how came he in, or who could have introduced him?" "Ah, wretched cauzee!" cried the barber, "you and your long beard shall never make me believe you. I know your daughter is in love with our master, and appointed him a meeting during the time of noon prayer. You, without doubt, have had notice of it, returned home, and surprised him, and made your slaves bastinado him. But this your wicked action shall not pass with impunity. The caliph shall be acquainted with it, and he will give true and brief justice. Let him come out, deliver him to us immediately, or if you do not, we will go in and take him out to your shame." "There is no occasion for so many words," replied the cauzee, "nor to make so great a noise. If what you say is true, go and find him out. I give you free liberty." Thereupon the barber and my domestics rushed into the house like furies, and looked for me all about. As I heard all that the barber said to the cauzee, I sought for a place to conceal myself, and could find nothing but a large empty trunk, in which I lay down, and shut it upon me. The barber, after he had searched everywhere, came into the chamber where I was, and opened the trunk. As soon as he saw me, he took it upon his head, and carried it away. He descended a high staircase into a court, which he crossed hastily, and at length reached the street door. While he was carrying me, the trunk unfortunately flew open, and not being able to endure the shame of being exposed to the view and shouts of the mob who followed us, I leaped out into the street with so much haste that I have been lame ever since. I was not sensible of the hurt at first, and therefore got up quickly to avoid the people, who laughed at me. Nay, I threw handfuls of gold and silver among them, and whilst they were gathering it up, I made my escape by cross streets and alleys. But the cursed barber followed me close, crying, "Stay, sir, why do you run so fast? If you knew how much I am afflicted at the ill treatment you received from the cauzee, you who are so generous, and to whom I and my friends are so much obliged, did I not tell you truly that you would expose your life by your obstinate refusal to let me go with you? See what has happened to you, by your own fault. And if I had not resolutely followed to see whither you went, what would have become of you? Whither do you go, sir? Stay for me." Thus the barber cried aloud in the street. It was not enough for him to have occasioned so great a scandal in the quarter where the cauzee lived, but he would have it known through the whole town. I was in such a rage that I had a great mind to stop and cut his throat; but considering this would have perplexed me further, I chose another course. Perceiving that his calling after me exposed me to vast numbers of people, who crowded to the doors or windows, or stopped in the street to gaze at me, I entered an inn, the chamberlain of which knew me, and finding him at the gate, whither the noise had brought him, I prayed him, for the sake of heaven, to hinder that madman from coming in after me. He promised to do so, and was as good as his word, but not without a great deal of trouble, for the obstinate barber would enter in spite of him, and did not retire without calling him 1,000 names. After the chamberlain had shut the gate, the barber continued telling all he met what great service he had done me. Thus I rid myself of that troublesome fellow. After this, the chamberlain prayed me to tell him my adventure, which I did, and then desired him to let me have an apartment until I was cured. 'But, sir,' said he, 'will it not be more convenient for you to go home?' 'I will not return thither,' replied I, 'for the detestable barber will continue plaguing me there, and I shall die of vexation to be continually teased by him. Besides, after what has befallen me to-day, I cannot think of staying any longer in this town. I must go whither my ill fortune leads me.' Accordingly, when I was cured, I took all the money I thought necessary for my travels, and divided the rest of my property among my kindred. Thus, gentlemen, I left Bagdad and came hither. I had ground to hope that I should not meet this pernicious barber in a country so far from my own, and yet I find him amongst you. Be not surprised then at my haste to be gone. You may easily judge how unpleasant to me is the sight of a man who was the occasion of my lameness, and of my being reduced to the melancholy necessity of living so far from my kindred, friends, and country.' When he had spoken these words, the lame young man rose up and went out. The master of the house conducted him to the gate, and told him he was sorry that he had given him, though innocently, so great a subject of mortification. When the young man was gone," continued the tailor, "we were all astonished at the story, and turning to the barber, told him he was very much to blame, if what we had just heard was true. 'Gentlemen,' answered he, raising up his head, which till then he had held down, 'my silence during the young man's discourse is sufficient to testify that he advanced nothing that was not true; but for all that he has said to you, I maintain that I ought to have done what I did. I leave you to be judges. Did not he throw himself into danger, and could he have come off so well without my assistance? He may think himself happy to have escaped with the lame leg. Did not I expose myself to greater danger to get him out of a house where I thought he was ill treated? Has he any reason to complain of and abuse me? This is what one gets by serving unthankful people. He accuses me of being a prattling fellow, which is a mere slander. Of 7 brothers, I speak least, and have most wit to my share. And to convince you of this, gentlemen." Section 6 of The Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 2, by Anonymous. The Story of the Barber. In the reign of the Caliph Mustansir Billah, that is, seeking victory of God, a prince so famous for his liberality towards the poor, 10 highwaymen infested the roads about Bagdad, and for a long time committed unheard of robberies and cruelties. The Caliph, having notice of this, sent for the judge of the police some days before the feast of Bairam, and ordered him, on pain of death, to bring all the 10 to him. The judge of the police used so much diligence, and sent so many people in pursuit of the 10 robbers, that they were taken on the very day of Bairam. I was walking at the time on the banks of the Tigris, and saw 10 men richly apparelled go into a boat. Had I but observed the guards who had them in custody, I might have concluded they were robbers; but my attention was fixed on the men themselves, and thinking they were people who designed to spend the festival in jollity, I entered the boat with them, hoping they would not object to my making one of the company. We descended the Tigris, and landed before the Caliph's palace. I had by this time had leisure to reflect, and to discover my mistake. When we quitted the boat, we were surrounded by a new troop of the judge of the police's guard, who bound us all and carried us before the Caliph. I suffered myself to be bound as well as the rest, without speaking one word, for what would it have availed to have spoken or made any resistance? That had been the way to have got myself ill treated by the guards, who would not have listened to me, for they are brutish fellows, who will hear no reason. I was with the robbers, and that was enough to make them believe me to be one of their number. When we had been brought before the Caliph, he ordered the 10 highwaymen's heads to be cut off immediately. The executioner drew us up in a file within reach of his arm, and by good fortune I was placed last. He cut off the heads of the 10 highwaymen, beginning at the first, and when he came to me, he stopped. The Caliph, perceiving that he did not strike me, grew angry. "Did not I command thee," said he, "to cut off the heads of 10 highwaymen? And why hast thou cut off but 9? "Commander of the faithful," he replied, "Heaven preserve me from disobeying your Majesty's orders. Here are 10 bodies upon the ground, and as many heads which I have cut off. Your Majesty may count them." When the Caliph saw that what the executioner said was true, he looked at me with amazement, and perceiving that I had not the face of a highwayman, said to me, "Good old man, how came you to be among those wretches who have deserved 1,000 deaths?" I answered, "Commander of the faithful, I will make a true confession. This morning I saw those 10 persons, whose punishment is a proof of your Majesty's justice, take boat. I embarked with them, thinking they were men going to celebrate this day, which is the most distinguished in our religion." The Caliph could not forbear laughing at my adventure, and instead of treating me as a prattling fellow, as this lame young man did, he admired my discretion and taciturnity. "Commander of the faithful," I resumed, "your Majesty need not wonder at my silence on such an occasion as would have made another apt to speak. I make a particular profession of holding my peace, and on that account have acquired the glorious title of Silent, by which I am distinguished from my 6 brothers. This is the effect of my philosophy, and in a word, in this virtue consists my glory and happiness." "I am glad," said the Caliph, smiling, "that they gave you a title which you know so well how to use. But tell me, what sort of men were your brothers? Were they like you?" "By no means," I replied. "They were all of them loquacious, prating fellows; and as to their persons, there was still a greater difference betwixt them and me. The first was hump-backed, the second had rotten teeth, the third had but one eye, the fourth was blind, the fifth had his ears cut off, and the sixth had hair lips. They had met with such adventures as would enable you to judge of their characters, had I the honour of relating them to your Majesty." And the Caliph seemed desirous to hear their several stories. I went on without waiting his commands. Section 7 of The Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 2, by Anonymous. The story of the barber's eldest brother. My eldest brother, whose name was Bakbouk, the humpback, was a tailor. When he came out of his apprenticeship, he hired a shop opposite a mill, and having but very little business, could scarcely maintain himself. The miller, on the contrary, was very wealthy, and had a handsome wife. One day, as my brother was at work in his shop, he saw the miller's wife looking out of the window, and was charmed with her beauty. The woman took no notice of him, but shut her window, and made her appearance no more that day. The poor tailor did nothing all day long but lift up his eyes towards the mill. He pricked his finger oftener than once, and his work was not very regular. At night, when he was to shut his shop, he could scarcely tell how to do it, because he still hoped the miller's wife would once more come to the window. But at last he was forced to shut up and go home, where he passed but a very uncomfortable night. He arose betimes in the morning, and ran to his shop, in hopes to see his mistress, but he was no happier than the day before, for the miller's wife did not appear at the window above a minute in the course of the day. But that minute made the tailor the most amorous man that ever lived. The third day he had more ground of satisfaction, for the miller's wife cast her eyes upon him by chance, and surprised him as he was gazing at her, which convinced her of what passed in his mind. No sooner did the miller's wife perceive my brother's inclination, than, instead of allowing it to excite her resentment, she resolved to divert herself with it. She looked at him with a smiling countenance, and my brother returned her smile, but in so ludicrous a way that the miller's wife hastily shut her window, lest her loud laughter should make him sensible that she only ridiculed him. Poor Bacbouc interpreted her carriage to his own advantage, and flattered himself that she looked upon him with pleasure. The miller's wife resolved to have sport with my brother. She had a piece of very fine stuff, with which she had a long time designed to make a vest. She wrapped it up in a fine embroidered silk handkerchief, and sent it to him by a young slave whom she kept, who, being taught her lesson, went to the tailor's shop and told him, "My mistress gives you her service, and prays you to make her a vest of this stuff according to this pattern. She changes her dress often, so that her custom will be profitable to you." My brother doubted not but the miller's wife loved him, and thought she had sent him work so soon after what had passed betwixt them, only to signify that she knew his mind, and convince him that he had obtained her favour. He charged the slave to tell her mistress that he would lay aside all work for hers, and that the vest should be ready next morning. He worked at it with so much diligence that he finished it in the course of the same day. Next morning the young slave came to see if the vest was ready. Bacbouc delivered it to her neatly folded up, telling her, "I am too much concerned to please your mistress to neglect her work. I would engage her by my diligence to employ no other than myself for the time to come." The young slave went some steps as if she had intended to go away, and then coming back, whispered to my brother, "I had forgotten part of my commission. My mistress charged me to make her compliments to you, and to ask how you passed the night. As for her, poor woman, she loves you to that degree that she could not sleep." "Tell her," answered my silly brother, "I have so strong a passion for her, that for these 4 nights I have not slept one wink." After such a compliment from the miller's wife, my brother thought she would not let him languish long in expectation of her favours. About a quarter of an hour after, the slave returned to my brother with a piece of satin. "My mistress," said she, "is very well pleased with her vest. Nothing in the world can fit her better, and as it is very handsome, she will not wear it without a new pair of drawers. She prays you to make her one as soon as you can of this piece of satin." "Enough," said Bacbouc. "I will do it before I leave my shop. You shall have it in the evening." The miller's wife showed herself often at her window, and was very prodigal of her charms to encourage my brother. You would have laughed to see him work. The pair of drawers was soon made, and the slave came for it, but brought the tailor no money, neither for the trimming he had bought for the vest, nor for the making. In the meantime, this unfortunate lover, whom they only amused, though he could not see it, had eaten nothing all that day, and was forced to borrow money at night to buy his supper. Next morning, as soon as he arrived at his shop, the young slave came to tell him that the miller wanted to speak to him. "My mistress," said she, "spoke to him so much in your praise, when she showed him your work, that he has a mind you should work for him also. She does this on purpose, that the connection she wishes to form betwixt you and him may crown your mutual wishes with success." My brother was easily persuaded, and went to the mill with the slave. The miller received him very kindly, and showed him a piece of cloth, and told him he wanted shirts, bade him make it into 20, and return him again what was left. My brother had work enough for 5 or 6 days to make 20 shirts for the miller, who afterwards gave him another piece of cloth to make him as many pair of drawers. When they were finished, Bacbouc carried them to the miller, who asked him what he must have for his pains. My brother answered, he would be content with 20 dirhams of silver. The miller immediately called the young slave, and bade her bring him his weights, to see if his money was right. The slave, who had her lesson, looked at my brother with an angry countenance, to signify to him that he would spoil all if he took money. He knew her meaning, and refused to take any, though he wanted it so much that he was forced to borrow some to buy the thread to sew the shirts and drawers. When he left the miller, he came to me to borrow money to purchase provisions, and told me they did not pay him. I gave him some copper money I had in my purse, and upon that he subsisted for some days. It is true indeed he lived upon nothing but broth, nor had he his fill of that. One day he went to the miller, who was busy at his work, and thinking my brother came for money, offered him some. But the young slave being present, made him another sign not to take it, which he complied with, and told the miller he did not come for his money, but only to know how he did. The miller thanked him, and gave him an upper garment to make. Bacbouc carried it to him the next day. When the miller drew out his purse, the young slave gave my brother the usual sign, on which he said to the miller, "Neighbour, there is no haste, we will reckon another time." So that the poor ninny went to his shop again with 3 terrible distempers, love, hunger, and an empty purse. The miller's wife was not only avaricious but ill-natured, for, not content with cheating my brother of his due, she provoked her husband to revenge himself upon him for making love to her, which they accomplished thus. The miller invited Bacbouc one night to supper, and after giving him a very sorry treat, said to him, "Brother, it is too late for you to return home, you had better stay here all night," and then took him to a place in the mill where there was a bed. There he left him, and went to bed with his wife. About the middle of the night the miller came to my brother and said, "Neighbour, are you asleep? My mule is ill, and I have a quantity of corn to grind. You will do me a great kindness if you will turn the mill in her stead." Bacbouc, to show his good nature, told him he was ready to do him that service if he would show him how. The miller tied him by the middle in the mule's place, and whipping him soundly over the back, said to him, "Go on, neighbour." "Ho!" exclaimed my brother, "why do you beat me?" "It is to make you brisk," replied the miller, "for without a whip my mule will not go." Bacbouc was amazed at this treatment, but durst not complain. When he had gone 5 or 6 rounds, he would fain have rested, but the miller gave him a dozen sound lashes, saying, "Courage, neighbour, do not stop, pray, you must go on without taking breath, otherwise you will spoil my meal." The miller obliged my brother to turn the mill thus all night. About break of day he left him without untying him, and went to his wife's chamber. Bacbouc continued there for some time, and at last the young slave came and untied him. "Ah," said the treacherous wretch, "how my mistress and I pitied you! We had no hand in this wicked trick which her husband has played you." The wretched Bacbouc answered not a word. He was so much fatigued with work and blows, but crept home to his house, resolving never to think more of the miller's wife. The telling of this story, continued the barber, made the caliph laugh. "Go home," said he to me. "I have ordered something to be given you to make up for the loss of the good dinner you expected." "Commander of the faithful," I replied, "I pray your majesty to let me stay till I have told the story of my other brothers." The caliph, having signified by his silence that he was willing to hear me, I went on thus. Section 8 of The Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 2, by Anonymous. The story of the barber's second brother. My second brother, who was called Bakbara the Toothless, going one day through the city, met in a distant street an old woman, who came up to him and said, "I want one word with you, pray stop a moment." He did so, and asked what she would have. "If you have time to come with me," said she, "I will bring you into a stately palace, where you shall see a lady as fair as the day. She will receive you with much pleasure, and treat you with excellent wine. I need say no more." "But is what you say true?" demanded my brother. "I am no lying hussy," replied the old woman. "I say nothing to you but what is true. But hark, I have something to ask of you. You must be prudent, say but little, and be extremely polite." Bakbarah agreed to all this. The old woman went on, and he followed her. They came to the gate of a great palace, where there was a number of officers and domestics. Some of them would have stopped my brother, but no sooner did the old woman speak to them than they let him pass. Then, turning to my brother, she said to him, "You must remember that the young lady I bring you to loves good nature and modesty, and cannot endure to be contradicted. If you please her in these respects, you may be sure to obtain of her what you please." Bakbarah thanked her for this advice, and promised to follow it. She brought him into a superb court, answerable to the magnificence of the palace. There was a gallery round it, and a garden in the middle. The old woman made him sit down on a handsome sofa, and bade him stay a moment, till she went to acquaint the young lady with his arrival. My brother, who had never been in such a stately palace before, gazed on the fine things that he saw, and judging of his good fortune by the magnificence of the palace, he was scarcely able to contain himself for joy. In a short time he heard a great noise, occasioned by a troop of merry slaves, who came towards him with loud fits of laughter, and in the middle of them he perceived a young lady of extraordinary beauty, who was easily known to be their mistress by the respect they paid her. Bakbarah, who expected private conversation with the lady, was extremely surprised when he saw so much company with her. In the meantime the slaves, as they drew near, put on a grave countenance, and when the young lady came up to the sofa, my brother rose and made her a low obeisance. She took the upper seat, prayed him to sit down, and said to him with a smiling countenance, "I am much pleased to see you, and wish you all the happiness you can desire." "Madam," replied Bakbarah, "I cannot desire a greater happiness than to be in your company." "You seem to be of a pleasant humour," said she, "and to be disposed to pass the time agreeably." She commanded a collation to be brought, and immediately a table was covered with several baskets of fruit and sweetmeats. The lady sat down at the table with the slaves and my brother, and he being placed just opposite to her, when he opened his mouth to eat, she perceived he had no teeth, and taking notice of this to her slaves, she and they laughed heartily. Bakbarah from time to time lifted up his head to look at her, and, perceiving her laugh, concluded it was from the pleasure she derived from his company, and flattered himself that she would speedily send away her slaves, and remain with him alone. She guessed his thoughts, and amusing herself to flatter him in this mistake, addressed him in the most pleasant language, and presented him the best of everything with her own hand. The entertainment being finished, they rose from the table. 10 slaves took musical instruments, and began to play and sing, and others to dance. My brother, to please them, danced likewise, and the lady danced with them. After they had danced some time, they sat down to take breath, and the young lady, calling for a glass of wine, looked upon my brother with a smiling countenance, to signify that she was going to drink his health. He rose and stood while she drank. When she had done, instead of giving back the glass, she ordered it to be filled, and presented it to my brother that he might pledge her. My brother took the glass from the young lady's hand, which he kissed at the same time, and stood and drank to her, in return for the favour she had done him. The lady then made him sit down by her, and began to caress him. She put her hand behind his head, and gave him some tips from time to time with her fingers. Ravished with these favours, he thought himself the happiest man in the world, and felt disposed to kiss the charming lady, but durst not take that liberty before so many slaves, who had their eyes upon him, and laughed at their lady's wanton tricks. The young lady continued to tip him with her fingers, but at last gave him such a sound box on the ear that he grew angry. The colour came into his face, and he rose up to remove to a greater distance from such a rude playfellow. Then the old woman, who brought him thither, gave him a look, to let him know that he was in the wrong, and that he had forgotten her advice to be very complaisant. He owned his fault, and to make amends went near the young lady again, pretending that he did not remove out of any ill humour. She drew him by the arm, made him sit down by her, and gave him 1,000 malicious squeezes. Her slaves took their part in the diversion. One gave poor Bakbarah several fillips on the nose with all her might. Another pulled him by the ears as if she would have pulled them off, and others boxed him in a manner that might have made it appear they were not in jest. My brother bore all this with admirable patience, affecting a gay air, and looking at the old woman, said to her with a forced smile, "You told me, indeed, that I should find the lady perfectly kind, pleasant, and charming. I am mightily obliged to you." "All this is nothing," replied the old woman. "Let her go on, you will see other things by and by." Then the young lady said to him, "Brother, you are a brave man. I am glad to find you are so good-humoured and complaisant to bear with my little caprices, and that your humour is so conformable to mine." "Madam," replied Bakbarah, who was charmed with this address, "I am no more at my own disposal. I am wholly yours. You may do with me as you please." "How you oblige me," returned the lady, "by such submission! I am well pleased with you, and would have you be so with me. Bring him perfume and rose water." Upon this 2 slaves went out, and returned speedily, one with a silver casket filled with the best of aloes wood, with which she perfumed him, and the other with rose water, which she sprinkled on his face and hands. My brother was quite enraptured with this handsome treatment. After this ceremony, the young lady commanded the slaves, who had already played on their instruments and sung, to renew their concerts. They obeyed, and while they were thus employed, the lady called another slave, and ordered her to take my brother with her, and do what she knew, and bring him back to her again. Bakbarah, who heard this order, got up quickly, and going to the old woman, who also rose to accompany him and the slave, prayed her to inform him what they were to do with him. "My mistress is only curious," replied the old woman softly. "She has a mind to see how you look in a woman's dress, and this slave, who is desired to take you with her, has orders to paint your eyebrows, to cut off your whiskers, and to dress you like a woman." "You may paint my eyebrows as much as you please," said my brother. "I consent to that, because I can wash it off again. But to shave me, you know I must not permit. How can I appear abroad again without moustaches?" "Beware of refusing what is asked of you," returned the old woman. "You will spoil your fortune, which is now in as favourable a train as heart can wish. The lady loves you, and has a mind to make you happy. And will you, for a nasty whisker, renounce the most delicious favours that man can obtain?" Bakbarah listened to the old woman, and without saying a word, went to a chamber with the slave, where they painted his eyebrows with red, cut off his whiskers, and were going to do the like with his beard. My brother's patience then began to fail. "Oh," said he, "I will never part with my beard." The slave told him that it was to no purpose to have parted with his whiskers if he would not also part with his beard, which could never comport with woman's dress, and she wondered that a man who was upon the point of being loved by the finest lady in Bagdad should be concerned about his beard. The old woman threatened him with the loss of the young lady's favour, so that at last he allowed them to do what they would. When he was dressed in female attire, they brought him before the young lady, who laughed so heartily when she saw him that she fell backward on the sofa. The slaves laughed and clapped their hands, so that my brother was quite out of countenance. The young lady got up, and still laughing, said to him, "After so much complaisance, I should be very much to blame not to love you with all my heart. But there is one thing more you must do for me, and that is, to dance as we do." He obeyed, and the young lady and her slaves danced with him, laughing as if they had been mad. After they had danced some time, they all fell upon the poor wretch, and did so box and kick him, that he fell down like one out of his senses. The old woman helped him up again, and that he might not have time to think of his ill treatment, bade him take courage, and whispered in his ear that all his sufferings were at an end, and that he was just about to receive his reward. The old woman continued her discourse to Bakbarah thus: "You have only one thing more to do, and that is but a small one. You must know that my mistress has a custom, when she has drunk a little, as you see she has done to-day, to let no one that she loves come near her, except they be stripped to their shirt, and when they have done so, she takes a little advantage of them, and begins running before them through the gallery, and from chamber to chamber, till they catch her. This is one more of her humours. What advantage soever she takes of you, considering your nimbleness, you will soon overtake her. Strip yourself then to your shirt, undress yourself without ceremony." My silly brother had done too much to hesitate at anything now. He undressed himself, and in the meantime the young lady was stripped to her shift and drawers, that she might run the more nimbly. When they were ready, the young lady took the advantage of 20 paces, and then began to run with surprising swiftness. My brother followed as fast as he could, the slaves in the meantime laughing heartily and clapping their hands. The young lady, instead of losing ground, gained upon my brother. She made him run 2 or 3 times round the gallery, and then, entering a long dark passage, made her escape. Bakbarah, who still followed, having lost sight of her in the passage, was obliged to slacken his pace, because of the darkness of the place. At last, perceiving a light, he ran towards it, and went out at a door, which was immediately shut after him. You may imagine how he was surprised to find himself in a street inhabited by couriers, and they were no less surprised to see him in his shirt, his eyes painted red, and without beard or moustaches. They began to clap their hands and shout at him, and some of them ran after him and lashed his back with leather straps. They then took him and set him upon an ass, which they met by chance, and carried him through the town, exposed to the laughter of the people. To complete his misfortune, as he went by the judge's house, he would needs know the cause of the tumult. The couriers told him that they saw him come in that condition from the gate of the apartments of the Grand Vizier's women, which opened into their street, upon which the judge ordered unfortunate Bakbarah to have 100 blows with a cane on the soles of his feet, and sent him out of the town with orders never to return. "Thus, Commander of the Faithful," said I to the Caliph, "I have given an account of the adventure of my second brother, who did not know that our greatest ladies divert themselves sometimes by putting such tricks upon young people who are so foolish as to be caught in the snare." The barber, without breaking off, told the story of his third brother in the following manner. End of section 8. Section 9 of The Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 2, by Anonymous. The story of the barber's third brother. Commander of the Faithful, my third brother, whose name was Bakbak, was blind, and his evil destiny reduced him to beg from door to door. He had been so long accustomed to walk through the streets alone that he wanted none to lead him. He had accustomed to knock at people's doors, and not to answer till they opened to him. One day he knocked thus, and the master of the house, who was alone, cried, "Who is there?" My brother made no answer, and knocked a second time. The master of the house asked again and again, "Who is there?" but to no purpose, no one answered, upon which he came down, opened the door, and asked my brother what he wanted. "Give me something, for heaven's sake," said Back-back. "You seem to be blind," replied the master of the house. "Yes, to my sorrow," answered my brother. "Give me your hand," resumed the master of the house. My brother did so, thinking he was going to give him alms, but he only took him by the hand to lead him up to his chamber. Back-back thought he had been carrying him to dine with him, as many other people had done. When they reached the chamber, the man let go his hand, and sitting down asked him again what he wanted. "I have already told you," said Back-back, "that I want something for God's sake." "Good blind man," replied the master of the house, "all that I can do for you is to wish that God may restore you your sight." "You might have told me that at the door," replied my brother, "and not have given me the trouble to come upstairs." "And why, fool," said the man of the house, "do not you answer at first when people ask you who is there? Why do you give anybody the trouble to come and open the door when they speak to you?" "What will you do with me then?" asked my brother. "I tell you again," said the man of the house, "I have nothing to give you." "Help me down the stairs then, as you brought me up." "The stairs are before you," said the man of the house, "and you may go down by yourself if you will." My brother attempted to descend, but missing a step about the middle of the stairs, fell to the bottom and hurt his head and his back. He got up again with much difficulty, and went out cursing the master of the house, who laughed at his fall. As my brother went out of the house, 2 blind men, his companions, were going by, knew him by his voice, and asked him what was the matter. He told them what had happened, and afterwards said, "I have eaten nothing to-day. I conjure you to go along with me to my house, that I may take some of the money that we 3 have in common to buy me something for supper." The 2 blind men agreed, and they went home with him. You must know that the master of the house where my brother was so ill used was a robber, and of a cunning and malicious disposition. He overheard from his window what Back-back had said to his companions, and came down and followed them to my brother's house. The blind men being seated, Back-back said to them, "Brothers, we must shut the door, and take care there be no stranger with us." At this the robber was much perplexed, but perceiving a rope hanging down from a beam, he caught hold of it and hung by it, while the blind men shut the door, and felt about the room with their sticks. When they had done, and had sat down again in their places, the robber left his rope, and seated himself softly by my brother, who, thinking himself alone with his blind comrades, said to them, "Brothers, since you have trusted me with the money which we have been a long time gathering, I will show you that I am not unworthy of the confidence you repose in me. The last time we reckoned, you know we had 10,000 dirhams, and that we put them into 10 bags. I will show you that I have not touched one of them." Having so said, he put his hand among some old clothes, and taking out the bags one after another, gave them to his comrades, saying, "There they are. You may judge by their weight that they are whole, or you may tell them if you please." His comrades answered there was no need, they did not mistrust him. So he opened one of the bags, and took out 10 dirhams, and each of the other blind men did the like. My brother put the bags into their place again, after which one of the blind men said to him, "There is no need to lay out anything for supper, for I have collected as much victuals from good people as will serve us all." At the same time he took out of his bag bread and cheese and some fruit, and putting all upon the table, they began to eat. The robber, who sat at my brother's right hand, picked out the best and ate with them. But whatever care he took to make no noise, Back heard his chaps going, and cried out immediately, "We are undone, there is a stranger among us." Having so said, he stretched out his hand and caught hold of the robber by the arm, cried out, "Thieves!" fell upon him and struck him. The other blind men fell upon him in like manner. The robber defended himself as well as he could, and being young and vigorous, besides having the advantage of his eyes, gave furious blows, sometimes to one, sometimes to another, and cried out, "Thieves!" louder than they did. The neighbours came running at the noise, broke open the door, and had much ado to separate the combatants. But having at last succeeded, they asked the cause of their quarrel. My brother, who still had hold of the robber, cried out, "Gentlemen, this man I have hold of is a thief, and stole in with us on purpose to rob us of the little money we have." The thief, who shut his eyes as soon as the neighbours came, feigned himself blind, and exclaimed, "Gentlemen, he is a liar. I swear to you by heaven and by the life of the caliph that I am their companion, and they refuse to give me my just share. They have all three fallen upon me, and I demand justice." The neighbours would not interfere in their quarrel, but carried them all before the judge. When they came before the magistrate, the robber, without staying to be examined, cried out, still feigning himself blind, "Sir, since you are deputed to administer justice by the caliph, whom God prosper, I declare to you that we are equally criminal, my 3 comrades and I, but we have all engaged upon oath to confess nothing except we be bastinadoed, so that if you would know our crime, you need only order us to be bastinadoed, and begin with me." My brother would have spoken, but was not allowed to do so, and the robber was put under the bastinado. The robber, being under the bastinado, had the courage to bear 20 or 30 blows, when, pretended to be overcome with pain, he first opened one eye and then the other, and crying out for mercy, begged the judge would put a stop to the blows. The judge, perceiving that he looked upon him with his eyes open, was much surprised, and said to him, "Rogue, what is the meaning of this miracle?" "Sir," replied the robber, "I will discover to you an important secret, if you will pardon me, and give me, as a pledge that you will keep your word, the seal ring which you have on your finger." The judge consented, gave him his ring, and promised him pardon. "Under this promise," continued the robber, "I must confess to you, sir, that I and my 3 comrades do all of us see very well. We feigned ourselves to be blind, that we might freely enter people's houses and women's apartments, where we abuse their weakness. I must further confess to you, that by this trick we have gained together 10,000 dirhams. This day I demanded of my partners 2,500 that belonged to my share, but they refused because I told them I would leave them, and they were afraid I should accuse them. Upon my pressing still to have my share, they fell upon me, for which I appeal to those people who brought us before you. I expect from your justice, sir, that you will make them deliver me the 2,500 dirhams which is my due, and if you have a mind that my comrades should confess the truth, you must order them 3 times as many blows as I have had, and you will find they will open their eyes as well as I have done." My brother and the other 2 blind men would have cleared themselves of this horrid charge, but the judge would not hear them. "Villains," said he, "do you feign yourselves blind then, and under that pretext of moving their compassion, cheat people and commit such crimes?" "He is an impostor," cried my brother, "and we take God to witness that none of us can see." All that my brother could say was in vain. His comrades and he received each of them 200 blows. The judge expected them to open their eyes, and ascribed to their obstinacy what really they could not do. All the while the robber said to the blind men, "Poor fools that you are, open your eyes, and do not suffer yourselves to be beaten to death." Then, addressing himself to the judge, said, "I perceive, sir, that they will be maliciously obstinate to the last, and will never open their eyes. They wish certainly to avoid the shame of reading their own condemnation in the face of every one that looks upon them. It were better, if you think fit, to pardon them, and to send some person along with me for the 10,000 dirhams they have hidden." The judge consented to give the robber 2,500 dirhams, and kept the rest himself. And as for my brother and his 2 companions, he thought he showed them pity by sentencing them only to be banished. As soon as I heard what had befallen my brother, I went to him. He told me his misfortune, and I brought him back secretly to the town. I could easily have justified him to the judge, and have had the robber punished as he deserved, but durst not make the attempt, for fear of bringing myself into danger of assassination. Thus I finished the sad adventure of my honest blind brother. The caliph laughed at it, as much as at those he had heard before, and ordered again that something should be given me. But without staying for it, I began the story of my 4th brother. End of section 9. Section 10 of the Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 2, by Anonymous. The story of the barber's 4th brother. Alcouz was the name of the 4th brother, who lost one of his eyes, upon an occasion that I shall have the honour to relate to your majesty. He was a butcher by profession, and had a particular way of teaching rams to fight, by which he gained the acquaintance and friendship of the chief lords of the country, who loved that sport, and for that end kept rams at their houses. He had besides a very good trade, and had his shop always full of the best meat, because he spared no cost for the prime of every sort. One day, when he was in his shop, an old man with a long white beard came and bought 6 pounds of meat of him, gave him money for it, and went his way. My brother thought the money so pure and well coined that he put it apart by itself. The same old man came every day for 5 months together, bought a like quantity of meat, and paid for it in the same kind of money, which my brother continued to lay apart. At the end of 5 months, Alcouz, having a mind to buy a lot of sheep, and to pay for them in this money, opened his chest, but instead of finding his money, was extremely surprised to see nothing in the place where he had laid it but a parcel of leaves clipped round. He beat his head and cried out aloud, which presently brought the neighbours about him, who were as much surprised as he when he told them the story. "Oh," cried my brother, weeping, "that this treacherous old fellow would come now with his hypocritical looks!" He had scarcely spoken when he saw him at a distance. He ran to him and laid hands on him. "Mussulmans," cried he, as loud as he could, "help! Hear what a cheat this wicked fellow has put upon me," and at the same time told a great crowd of people who came about him what he had formerly told his neighbours. When he had done, the old man said to him very gravely and calmly, "You had better let me go, and by that means make amends for the affront you have put upon me before so many people, for fear I should put a greater affront upon you, which I should be sorry to do." "How?" said my brother. "What have you to say against me? I am an honest man in my business, and fear not you nor anybody." "You would have me speak out then," resumed the old man in the same tone, and turning to the crowd, said to them, "Know, good people, that this fellow, instead of selling mutton as he ought to do, sells human flesh." "You are a cheat," said my brother. "No, no," continued the old man. "Good people, this very minute, while I am speaking to him, there is a man with his throat cut hung up in the shop like a sheep. Do any of you go thither, and see if what I say be not true." Just before my brother had opened his chest, he had killed a sheep, dressed it, and exposed it in the shop, according to custom. He protested that what the old man said was false, but notwithstanding all his protestations, the credulous mob, prejudiced against a man accused of such a heinous crime, would go to see whether the charge were true. They obliged my brother to quit the old man, laid hold of him, and ran like madmen into his shop, where they saw, to all appearance, a man hung up with his throat cut, as the old man had told them. For he was a magician, and deceived the eyes of all people, as he did my brother when he made him take leaves instead of money. At this sight, one of those who held Alcouz gave him a violent blow with his fist, and said to him, "Thou wicked villain, dost thou make us eat man's flesh instead of mutton?" And at the same time the old man gave him another blow, which beat out one of his eyes. Everybody that could get near him struck him, and not content with that, they carried him before a judge, with the pretended carcass of the man to be evidence against him. "Sir," said the old magician to the judge, "we have brought you a man who is so barbarous as to murder people and to sell their flesh instead of mutton. The public expects that you will punish him in an exemplary manner." The judge heard my brother with patience, but would believe nothing of the story of the money changed into leaves, called my brother a cheat, told him he would believe his own eyes, and ordered him to receive 500 blows. He afterwards made him tell him where his money was, took it all from him, and banished him for ever, after having made him ride 3 days through the city upon a camel, exposed to the insults of the people. I was not at Baghdad when this tragical adventure befell my fourth brother. He retired into a remote place, where he lay concealed till he was cured of the blows with which his back was terribly mangled. When he was able to walk, he went by night to a certain town where nobody knew him, and there he took a lodging, from whence he seldom moved. But being weary of this confined life, he went to walk in one of the suburbs, where suddenly he heard a noise of horsemen coming behind him. He was then by chance near the gate of a house, and fearing, after what had befallen him, that these horsemen were pursuing him, he opened the gate in order to hide himself, and after he had shut it, entered a court, where immediately 2 servants came and collared him, saying, "Heaven be praised that you have come of your own accord to surrender yourself. You have alarmed us so much these 3 last nights that we could not sleep, nor would you have spared our lives if we had not prevented your design." You may well imagine my brother was much surprised. "Good people," said he, "I know not what you mean. You certainly take me for somebody else." "No, no," replied they, "we know that you and your comrades are robbers. You were not contented to rob our master of all that he had, and to reduce him to beggary, but you conspired to take his life. Let us see if you have not a knife about you, which you had in your hand when you pursued us last night." Having said thus, they searched him, and found he had a knife. "Ho, ho!" cried they, laying hold of him, "and dare you say that you are not a robber?" "Why," said my brother, "cannot a man carry a knife about him without being a robber? If you will hearken to my story, instead of having so bad an opinion of me, you will be touched with compassion at my misfortunes." But far from attending to him, they fell upon him, trod upon him, took away his clothes, and tore his shirt. Then, seeing the scars on his back, "O dog," said they, redoubling their blows, "would you have us believe you are an honest man, when your back shows us the contrary?" "Alas," said my brother, "my crimes must be very great, since, after having been abused already so unjustly, I am thus treated a second time without being more culpable." The 2 servants, no way moved with his complaint, carried him before the judge, who asked him how he durst presume to go into their house and pursue them with a drawn knife. "Sir," replied the unfortunate Alcouz, "I am the most innocent man in the world, and am undone if you will not be pleased to hear me patiently. No one deserves more compassion." "Sir," exclaimed one of the domestics, "will you listen to a robber who enters people's houses to plunder and murder them? If you will not believe us, only look upon his back." And while he said so, he uncovered my brother's back, and showed it to the judge, who, without any other information, commanded his officers immediately to give him 100 lashes over the shoulders, and made him afterwards be carried through the town on a camel, with one crying before him, "Thus are men punished who enter people's houses by force." After having treated him thus, they banished him the town, and forbade him ever to return. Some people, who met him after the second misfortune, brought me word where he was. I went, brought him to Baghdad privately, and gave him all the assistance I could. The Caliph did not laugh so much at this story as at the other. He was pleased to pity the unfortunate Alcouz, and ordered something to be given me. But without giving his servants time to obey his orders, I continued my discourse, and said to him, "My sovereign lord and master, you see that I do not talk much, and since your majesty has been pleased to do me the favour to listen to me so far, I beg you would likewise hear the adventures of my 2 other brothers. I hope they will be as diverting as those of the former. You may make a complete history of them that will not be unworthy of your library. I shall do myself the honour then to acquaint you that the 5th brother was called Al-Nascar." End of section 10.